Welcome and thank you for watching. We're here to understand how CE production can help boat builders. To best explain it, we need to start by looking at how modern boat manufacturers might be organized. So let's start with the design team. It's their job to produce a design and specification for the boat that they want to build. Their designers should consider the various regulations that are in force in the intended markets. This means in practice that a design needs to conform to standards, and possibly it will need to be certified by a third party. These guys not only plan the timeline and critical path for production, but they should also be maintaining a library of standard work instructions that describe, whatever the model of boat, how common tasks are to be executed, such as fitting a valve, bilge pump or a hatch. There are probably some tasks that will need to be model-specific build instructions too. These instructions are then handed to the shop floor where the team have the task of building the boat. Finally, we then have the QA team, who pluck a boat off the line every so often and check it over to make sure that it is built to specification. So, there we have our typical boat manufacturer. You'll notice that when we discussed the regulations and standards, we said that the design team were responsible for compliance. This is true insofar as issues such as stability and structure, but a great deal of the standards cover details of fit-out that are not in the design. For example, if the fuel tank has a drain fitting, it must have a valve and a plug. The design team would not detail something like that. This would be included in the instructions produced by the production engineers. So this means that our production engineers need to access the standards too. Now, let's imagine you and I are both workers on the shop floor tasked with fitting electrical cables in the engine space. Perhaps our standard work instruction tells us we must not fit our conductor closer than 250 millimeters to an engine or generator exhaust. But we find that on our boat, we simply can't do that without a big rearrangement. We could only achieve 150 millimeters. Is this important or not? What do? Do we just fit it? We should probably ask the boss what to do. But let's imagine the boss is not at hand, so we just fit it and make a note to tell the boss later. The next day, our QA team happens to pick our boat and they find the conductor is not in line with the standard work instructions. So they check the model-specific build instructions, which says nothing on the topic. So QA concludes that the boat is not built to the instruction, which causes alarm. If 150 millimeters is less than is required by the standards, could it mean a product recall? The QA team need to consult the standards. The point is that if we, the electrical fitters, and the QA inspector had the clause of the standard written alongside the work instruction, it would be immediately clear, and this need not have been an issue at all, because ISO 10133 says conductors must be at least 250 millimeters from a dry exhaust, but maybe as close as 50 millimeters to a wet exhaust. So if our boat has a wet exhaust, then there's no problem at all. What we need to do now is add to the model-specific build instructions the fact that this boat has a wet exhaust and the conductor may be 150 millimeters from the exhaust, thereby overruling the 250 millimeter standard instruction. Is it realistic to think that we could produce this level of detailed documentation which cascades the standards and build instructions together from the design team to the shop floor, and as amendments are made, back up again? Well, yes. In fact, if you are exporting to Europe, you already have a document that should be doing this for you. The Recreational Craft Directive requires manufacturers to produce a technical file. We call this a technical construction file, or TCF. So what's in a TCF? What should be in a TCF? Well, the directive starts by saying the TCF must have a list of the standards to which we have built the boat. It also says the TCF must include test and calculation reports. But it doesn't say what evidence is required to prove the boat conforms to standards. So what do we say in the TCF about our conductor and our exhaust? Many manufacturers currently base their TCF on a series of tick lists. Typically, the design team would be required to compile a tick list for each standard applied. All the lists, together with the drawings and specification, test reports and so on, make up their TCF. A tick list serves just one purpose. It stops the design team from forgetting a clause of a standard. So let's take our exhaust and conductor. The tick list will say it should be 250 millimeters or 50 millimeters from a dry or wet exhaust, and a design team will put a tick in the box. They know the standard work instruction requires 250 millimeters. But every boat in the model range must have a tick in the same box, or else it would be non-compliant. So every TCF of every boat will have an identical array of ticks, meaning that there is no point in an authority even asking to see the TCF. There's going to be a tick in each box. But it won't tell them how far the conductor actually is from the exhaust, and it will not even show if the exhaust is wet or dry. This is not evidence. But with CE-ProDUCTION, your TCF can link it all together with a genuine evidence that is useful to all in the design and build process. Let's have a look how it works. Let's take our tick lists for each ISO standard, but rip away the ticks. We'll replace them with a text box for us to provide a detailed written answer in full sentences about how our boat satisfies each and every clause of the standard. Now I hear you shout, but to write a fully detailed answer for every clause would take forever. Well, no, it won't, because CE-ProDUCTION can call upon your library of standard work instructions. So, for example, when our engineer is faced with writing up the electrical system checklist in the TCF, he or she can download the appropriate instructions in one click into our TCF. So in fact, compiling our TCF is actually quicker than making a tick list, even though it's infinitely more detailed. So what have we got? We have a TCF where each requirement of a standard is right alongside our detailed work instruction, which was dropped in from our library. This is fine for compliance, but it is too much information for most people to want to consult. It's a huge document. Most people in the company will only need to see a very small portion of the TCF. So CE-ProDUCTION allows the user to define filters to take away all the information you don't want to see. So the user can create a filter for electrical fitters, which picks out only the clauses of the electrical standards that relate to their work. The user might choose to include just a handful of clauses or perhaps several full pages. When the filter is applied, we can print out a very targeted document that an electrical fitter would be interested to have when doing their work. But it's a living document. Let's go back to our conductor and the exhaust. The fitter with our filtered TCF can see that he can't follow the work instruction because he can't fit at 250 millimeters, but he can also see the requirement of the standard, and he can see that the boat remains compliant at 150 millimeters. So he or his boss need only amend the cell in the technical file where the separation is recorded. This means that the TCF is not just boat specific in terms of design and spec, but genuinely as built. CE-ProDUCTION also allows for continuous improvement. Let's imagine somebody in the shop floor actually made a modification that was considered to be an improvement. Well, when entering the details into the technical file, a single click can send the clause or entire checklist to the library to update the standard work instructions for future use. Thus, everyone from the shop floor can easily contribute to continuous improvement. Our QA team even could have a series of filters so that they would have a custom checklist to inspect, say, the fuel system one day, or the means of reboarding the next, all with the latest requirements and instructions side by side, with as-built details too. When they find the entry to our conductor, they can see the deviation and that it complies. What is more, as a new CE-ProDUCTION file was started at the beginning of the project with the latest additions of standards written into it, all can be assured that the entire project is up to date in all respects. If you want, you can go a lot further. You can even add hyperlinks in instructions that lead to drawings, photos, websites, and so on. So if the fitter was working with a tablet on board the boat, they could jump to all the information they can ever need right there on their station. So let's just summarize what CE-ProDUCTION can do. It creates the ultimate technical construction file with detailed evidence of compliance, not ticks, alongside the requirements of every clause of every applicable standard. The evidence can be instantaneously dropped in from a library of your standard work instructions, allowing almost instant compilation. The TCF can be filtered to give individual operatives only what they need to know from the TCF to carry out their role. The evidence can then be amended where required by anyone in the design, production, fitting, QA process and so on to reflect the specifics of a particular model or even a custom boat to reflect the final as-built boat. The TCF is now so accurate and detailed that compliance is guaranteed and liability minimized. Oh, and I haven't even mentioned that CE-ProDUCTION will also generate owner's manuals and declarations of conformity from the technical construction file, and it will do this in most European languages at the click of a button. The manual can be customized with your own logos, colors, fonts, drawings, or anything you wish to include, from photos to warranty information. Since they're based on a specific TCF, of course, the manuals are completely boat-specific. But I think that's enough to absorb for now. Go to rulefinder.net for further details, and thank you for listening.